Under this video, we'll create our fourth panel from our list of panels. So let's navigate to our panels package and create a new class. This will be called Word Panel. We will annotate this class with the component Spring Stereotype, and we'll also need to extend the JPanel class. Let's also add a default serial version UID. We will need to set up a new variable that will be a list of JButton, and we will call it generated word list, so that each letter from our generated word will map to a specific button that will be added to this list. A new variable called generated word that will keep our corresponding generated word, and the number of attempts that the user tried to guess the word. Under this JPanel class, we'll need a reference to the letters panel, so we'll inject it. Also, another reference to the images panel, so inject both of them using the auto-wired annotation. I have created a simple constructor, and over here we will set specific panel properties. I added the set layout as a simple flow layout, the preferred size for our panel, we will need to set the background color to black, and now we will annotate a new method with a post construct, so that it will be automatically invoked by the Spring container, and this method will create a JPanel. So far we will need to instantiate the generated word with a default word, since we don't have anything in place that will generate automatically and in a random fashion words. So we'll go with something simple at this stage. So the generated word will be game, and let's also instantiate the generated word list as a new array list, and the number of attempts should be 0 since we just started the game. Now, since we have a word in place, even if it's the default game word, we need to get the first and last letters from it. So this will be char specific variables. So for the first letter in word, we'll extract it from the generated word .charat of 0, and for the last letter in word, we'll get the generated word charat generated word word.length -1. So now we have both the first and last letters in the word. And we'll need to iterate over the generated word and create a button for each letter in the generated word. So final J button, let's call it LB, is instantiated to new J button, and by default we'll use that sign to simulate that the letter is not shown to the user. We'll set the button preferred size and also the button corresponding font. Also, let's set the background color to white and do not enable it. It should be disabled by default so that it will not respond to any click events or mouse events. We'll add this button to the generated word list and also to the corresponding panel. Now, since we have the first and last letters extracted from the generated word, we need to also show them into the graphical user interface to the user, since, as you know, we are doing a hangman simulation and the first and last letters of the words should be exposed to the user. So I expose the first letter. And also let's expose the last letter to the user using the setText method. Now we need to iterate over the generated word using a for loop. So for int I equals 0, I lower than generated word length -1, I++, and we need to get each letter from the word. Let's also add a comment here. And what we're trying to do here is to expose the current letter to the user if the current letter matches the first letter from the generated word or the last letter from the generated word. So if current letter equals to first letter or current letter equals to the last letter, we need to get the generated word list, the corresponding button reference, and set the text to the current letter. Okay. And now we need to disable the letters that are initially exposed in the word that we generated. So in this way we need to disable the first and last letters from the letters panel, since they are already exposed to the user and the user should not be able to click on them. So let's navigate to the letters panel and create a method here, and let's call it disable default letters. And this method should receive the first letter in word and also the last letter in word. So let's create some strings based on the two chars that we received as parameters, for the first letter and one for the last letter. Okay. And now we should disable the first letter. We need to get a reference to the first letter in word button. And for this, if you recall, we have the letters map that has references to all our buttons. And we'll get the corresponding button using the first letter dot uppercase. So based on the letters map key, we will be able to extract the corresponding JButton value. And we need to basically disable this button and also set the background color to green to simulate it in a way for the user. And a similar approach should be followed for the last letter that we receive as parameter for this method. So we will create a last letter in word button. And from the letters map, we'll get the last letter dot to uppercase. Let's fix this. Okay. So we have the corresponding JButton value, and we need to disable it and also set the background color to green. So let's do this. Set background color green, and that's basically it. So let's go back to the word panel and invoke that method. So we have the letters panel reference that we injected earlier in this component, and let's call the disable letters panel using the first letter in word and last letter in word. And now we should return the panel that we created from this method. As a next step, we need a method that will check if a selected letter is present in the generated word. For example, when we will select a letter from the letters panel, we need to check it if it's present in the generated word or not. And based on this, we'll do something. So let's set up a boolean value at letter found by default will be false. and iterate over the generated word. We need to get the current letter from the generated word .gerat of I, and we need to check if the current letter matches the letter that we selected. And if so, we'll invoke the generated word list .get of I set text string value of letter. So we'll expose the selected letter since it's found in the generated word. So the selected letter will be exposed to the user, simulating the fact that he was able to find the letter. And since the user was able to find the letter, maybe you are on the case that the entire word has been found. So if the letter was found, however, we should not forget to change the letter found with true. Okay. So if the letter was found, and we'll also need a method check completed word to see if all the letters from the generated word were found. So let's implement this check completed word, a simple method. So let's add a comment, check if all letters in the word have been found. So this is a private method. Check completed word, and we will need the mechanisms to figure out if all of the letters from the word have been found. And in order to do this, if we have at least one of that symbols that simulate that the letter is not shown to the user, it means that the word is not completed. So let's do a search on how many letters with that symbol we have in the generated word left. So number of letters found, we'll extract from the generated word list. We'll do stream filter, and for each button we check that the button text is equals to that symbol and do a count. And if number of letters found greater than 0, it means that the word is not completed. But in fact, let's change this variable to number of letters not found, since it's more descriptive. And if all the letters were found, we will return true. So going back to this statement, if letter found and check completed word, we will need to invoke the letters panel and get the letters map, and for each letter in the letters map, please recall that the keys are strings and values are JButtons. So for each button, we'll disable it so that the user will not be able to click on any button in the panel anymore. And also we should show a pop-up message using the J option pane, show message dialog, and let's inform the user that he was able to find the word in this case, and let's congratulate him. And let's go on the else case. If letter found it's not true, so the user was not able to identify a letter, we need to simulate this in the graphical user interface. So if you recall the list of images, we need to update an image reference from smile to sad. So we'll do this using the images panel, and on the images panel we need the reference to the images list. So we'll need to create the getter method for this under the images panel to have a reference once again to those 5 images that are used to simulate 5 possible attempts to the user to guess the entire word. So this will return the images list, and let's also add a setter method for this. Set images list that will receive a list of a J label, and this images list equals images list. So going back to the word panel, we have access now to the get images list. And we'll get the current attempt. Please recall that the number of attempts is 0 when we start the game, and we'll set the icon. We'll in fact change the icon from a default smile image to a sad image. We'll also increase the number of attempts. And since we increase the number of attempts, we should also check if we reach the maximum allowed attempts. So in this case, the maximum number of attempts is equal to the images panel get images list size, in our case 5. So if so, we'll iterate over the get letters map from the letters panel using the same approach described earlier, and we'll disable all buttons in order to disallow the user to click on any buttons left, and we will also inform the user that he was not able to find the word, meaning that he lost the game. So the word was generated word. Okay, so far so good. This looks good. And if you recall, we set up here a check letter method, but we don't call it actually. But we have an action listener for each of our buttons, and now under the button listener we need to invoke that check letter method using the Spring Context class that we defined earlier. So we need to get the instance of the word panel. Since you see that the button listener is not a Spring component and the word panel is a Spring component, and using the Spring Context class we will be able to properly invoke the method from the word panel using this button listener. So you see the word panel check letter of letter. So now we will also be able to invoke Spring corresponding beans from a component that is not associated to the Spring container. The last step will be to auto-wire the word panel under the handman frame and add it in the main panel under the north section. So let's do this. And let's also start the application now. We save the word panel. And you see, by default we have all panels in place and that default game word. You see that the attempts are in place. From a smile image, a sad image has been updated in the images panel.